Good afternoon, dear students. I hope you people are fit and fine. In previous video lectures, we were discussing about defamation, its meaning and essential elements, and explanations of Section 499. And today I am going to discuss exceptions of Section 499 of Indian Penal Code that defines defamation. So, in other words, what are the exceptions of offense of defamation? So, under section 499, there are 10 exceptions, and these exceptions state the instances in which an imputation prima facie defamatory may be excused. They are occasions when a man is allowed to speak out or write matters which would ordinarily be defamatory. These 10 exceptions may be briefly stated thus: first, imputation of truth for public good; second, public conduct of public servant; third is public conduct of public men other than public servants; fourth is comment on cases and conduct of witnesses and others concerned; fifth is merits of decisions and judicial proceedings; sixth is merits of public performances, literary criticism, etc. Seventh is censure in good faith by one in authority. Eighth is complaint to authority. Ninth is imputation for protection of interest, and 10th is caution in good faith. The exceptions may be further be grouped thus: first group, exception 1, correspondence to plea of justification, being a bare statement of truth for public good. Exceptions 2, 3 and 5, 2, 3, 5 and 6 correspond to the plea of fair comment on a matter of public interest. And third is exception 4, covers the plea of a fair report of judicial proceedings. Fourth is exception 7 and 8, cover the case of censure by a lawful authority passed in good faith and accusation made to a lawful authority in good faith. Fifth, exceptions 9 and 10 cover the case of imputation made in good faith by a person for protection of his interest and for public good, and the case of caution intended for the good of the person to whom it is conveyed for the public good. It may be pointed out the ninth exception states a general principle, of which exceptions 7, 8 and 10 are particular instances, so that the last 4 exceptions really fall under what is known as privilege, that is, communication made on a privileged occasion, which again means one made in the discharge of a duty or protection of an interest in the person who makes it. However, for our purpose, it is better that we should study these exceptions seriatim as provided in the IPC than following any other order. Logical it may be. So first exception is truth of the public good. This exception recognizes the publication of truth as a sufficient justification if it is made for public good. Truth by itself is not justification in criminal law, although it is sufficient justification in the civil law of torts. In England, according to Lord Campbell's Act 1843, it would be a good defense if the accused justifies his libel on the ground that it was true and that its publication was for public benefit, but such defense cannot be inquired into unless it is expressly pleaded. In this respect, the law is the same in India also. According to Section 106, the Indian Evidence Act 1872, the burden is cast upon the person who set up similar pleas in avoiding guilt. We must remember that both under English and Indian law, truth is no justification whatsoever against the defamation of the state known as sedition and against one's religion. The first law commission recommended that truth by itself ought to be recognized as a valid defense in all cases, but the legislature refused to accept it. As it is, the law is now definite that truth is no justification unless it is for public good. The truth of an allegation need not be literally proved. It is enough if it is substantially true. So where the accused was indicted for publishing a libel on the prosecutors contained in the following words: L, B and C are a gang who live by card sharping, and the accused justified the libel giving specific instances in which the person named had been cheated by the trio in the cards. Court held that it was sufficient to sustain the plea that two specific instances had been proved in substance and that it was not necessary to prove the other instances alleged. No amount of truth will justify a libel unless its publication was for the public good. The term public includes any class of the public or community. Thus, public means such as generals, judges, members of the public bodies, authors, actors, lawyers, doctors, and in fact all other professional men whose act concern the welfare of the public would come under it, so that the publication of truth concerning them would be protected if it is for public good. Second exception is about fair criticism of public servants. The first exception deals with allegation of facts, while the second exception deals with expression of opinion. In the second and the following exceptions, what is protected is opinion and not assertion. They are really fair comments upon public men on matters of public interest. Every citizen has a right to comment on those acts of public men which concern him as a subject of the realm, if he does not make his commentary a cloak for malice and slander. A writer in a public paper has the same right as any other person, and it is his privilege, if indeed not his duty, to comment on the acts of public men which concern not only himself but also concern the public, and discussing of which is for the public good. Moreover, where a person makes the public conduct of a public the subject of comment and it is for the public good, he is not liable to an action if the comments are made honestly and he honestly believes the facts to be as he states them, and there is no willful misrepresentation of fact or any misstatement which he must have known to be a misstatement if he had exercised ordinarily care. Men in public position, even though official, can claim no immunity from their criticism. This is the essential nature of the rule of law in a democratic country. Similarly, the authors and publishers of the book have no special privilege and are in no better position than any other man. But the person who undertakes to criticize the acts of public man must take care not to assert that which is not true as the basis of criticism, and he is bound not to conceal willfully anything which would show that the criticism is not well founded. Also, the opinion expressed must be in good faith. Next is third exception, that is fair comment on public conduct of public men. Fair comment on public conduct of public men other than public servants. In fact, this amounts to criticism on public questions. With the march of progress in every democratic state, citizens take an ever-increasing interest in public affairs, and these publicists form vigilant guardians of the rights of the people. In order to succeed on a plea of fair criticism, the accused should prove that his expression of opinion was fair and honest, and the alleged fact on which the opinion was based was true. Fourth exception talks about report of proceeding of court of justice. The ground on which the privilege of accurately reporting what takes place in a court of justice is based on the fact that judicial proceedings are public. Thus, the publication of what takes place there, even if some matters happen to be defamatory to some individuals, ought to be published because such publication enlarges the area of the court and the public has a right to know what takes place inside the court. It follows that the report must fairly represent to the reader what he would have learned from himself if he had been present. The report of the evidence on one side without the evidence on the other of the examination of witness without the cross-examination of the summing up of our judgment, where such summing up or judgment gave only a one-sided view of the case, would not be a fair report and therefore would not be privileged. Fifth exception talks about comment on cases. This exception protects bona fide comments on cases adjudicated, but not when they are still sub judice. Everyone has a right to discuss fairly and bona fide the administration of justice as evidenced before courts. Justice Fitzgerald said, thus, it is open to one to show that error was committed on the part of the judges or jury. Nay, further, for myself, I will say that the judge is in wide discussion of their acts in the administration of the law, and it is a relief to them to see error pointed out if it is committed. Yet, whilst they invite the fair discussion, it is not open to a journalist to impose corruption. Sixth exception is literary criticism. The object of this exception is that the public should have the benefit of free criticism of all public performances submitted to its judgment. As Lord Ellenborough observed, without liberty of criticism we neither have purity of state nor of morals. Fair discussion is essentially necessary for the truth of history and advancement of science. This exception is intended specifically to refer to literary and dramatic criticism of the works of literary men and dramatists. The essential conditions are of this exception that the author must have expressly or by implication invited public criticism, which he may do by the mere acts of publication, though he may not distribute his work for review. Second, the criticism must relate to the merits of the performance as distinct from the general capacity of the performer. And third is it must be made in good faith. On the other hand, seventh exception talks about censure by one in authority. This exception allows a person under whose authority others have been placed, either by their own consent or by the law, to ensure in good faith those who are so placed under his authority, so far as regards matter to which that authority relates. However, the privilege does not justify publication in the excess of the purpose or object which give rise to it. A man may in good faith complain of the conduct of his servant to the master, even though the complaint amounts to defamation. But he is not protected if he publishes the complaint in a newspaper. Excess of publication destroys the privilege. The two essential conditions for the application of this exception are that the censure must be on the conduct of the person within the scope of the critic's authority, and the censure must be passed in good faith. Eighth exception talks about complaint to authority. This exception refers to a complaint made to a superior touching conduct of his subordinate. The authors of IPC remarked thus in relation to this exception, we will allow a person to prefer an accusation against another in good faith to any person who has a lawful authority to restrain or punish the accused. The two conditions for the protection under this exception are the accusation must be made to a person who has authority over the party accused, and that the accusation must be preferred in good faith. Persons in authority would include the king, president, ministers, member of the House of Parliament, other officials of state, civil or military. Besides, There are the magistrates and the judges and the police to whom all persons are entitled to represent their grievances if it is within the scope of their authority to redress the same. Besides the above, persons in domestic circles such as husband, a guardian, a father would also come under the category of persons in authority. Ninth exception talks about imputation for protection of interest. This exception rests on the ground that honest communications made in the course of business and of social intercourse should be duly protected so long as the parties act in good faith. The ninth and 10th exceptions cover the case of imputation made in good faith by a person for the protection of his interest or for the public good, and the case of caution intended for the good of the person to whom it is conveyed or for the public good. In one sense, the ninth exception states a general principle of which exceptions 7 and 10 are particular instances, so that the whole series of exceptions 7 to 10 fall under the heading of communications made on a privileged occasion. That is, one made in the discharge of a duty of protection of an interest in the person who makes it. The ninth exception includes the first exception. It refers to any imputation made in good faith, whereas the first exception applies only to imputation made in good faith. Whereas the first exception applies only to imputations made for public good. Under the ninth exception, the accused need not establish that every word that he has spoken or written is literally true. And 10th exception is caution in good faith. The 10th exception covers cases of imputation in the discharge of a social duty, such as when Mr. A says to his intimate friend B that C, his dismissed servant who now seeks employment under B, is a dishonest man and ought not to be trusted. So also a relation may confidently advise a lady not to marry a particular suitor and may or may not assign reasons, in which case the statement will be privileged. A person cannot claim privilege by merely writing on this letter private and confidential. But two persons may really make a communication confidential in the large sense of the term, if there is in fact such a relationship between them. Such relationship exists between counsel and client, husband and wife, guardian and ward, master and servant, teacher and pupil, and even between intimate friends. So a father, guardian, or an intimate friend may warn a young man against associating with a particular individual, or a lady against marrying an objectionable suitor. So these has been the exceptions of the defamation under section 499. So I hope this lecture will be helpful to understand the meaning and concept of definition, its exceptions and explanations. Thank you very much.